So yeah, it's one of the worst feelings in the world. Actually, have sit there and record these entire things, and then have them just have the computer drop them and went and dropped about 8 minutes, and then I don't I can't get it to get back on. So anyways, we're reviewing the questions from last video, and in the last video the questions are what are the two time periods for today's people? There's only two time periods. You got the postmodern age, everybody that come after the internet, and then you got the modern age, right? So the postmodern age, which is today, we've reached the postmodern generation. The internet changes everything. It's a Gutenberg printing press revolution, right? So we have a Gutenberg printing press revolution. That changes everything, changes the whole game. There's the people after 2000, then there's the people that was before 2000s, and that's it. Those are the only two areas I think that's really worthy of studying. Those who lived in the 1980s and 1990s, to me, are the same people as the Paleo-Indians, okay? So, actually, the Paleo-Indians could hunt big game. They're more like the Archaic Indians, right, who didn't have any big game to hunt. The Paleo-Indians might have actually wiped out the mastodon and the mammoths, but nobody knows. It could have been a climate change, which some people think is very unlikely. They think it was a sudden death, so either they were killed, or they were ill, or they were chilled by a comet of some sort. Okay, so the Archaic era of Kentucky's first peoples ends about 2,000 to 3,000 years ago, with its ending defined by farming. Okay, so you got the Paleo-Indian era, you got the Archaic era, and then it goes to the Woodland era. The Archaic era ends with the adoption of sedentary farming. Sedentary means to stay put. They use that word with couch potatoes, and physical activity can kill. It's like one of the leading killer of people all throughout the world. The adoption of sedentary farming, the agricultural revolution, domesticated plants. So that's what ends the Archaic era. What Cherokee and his crippled friend, either named Will or Jack, was murdered by Edward Ned Mitchell and John Livingston on February 10th, 1797 in Clay County, Kentucky, while he was sleeping? Chief Redbird, okay? Cherokee Chief Redbird, also Cherokee Chief Cardinal. Redbird is a cardinal, right? So, yeah, while he was sleeping, they had killed Chief Redbird in Clay County in 1797. This was John Sevier's people. He was the governor of Tennessee. He's also going to be responsible for the Great Children Massacre of Yahoo Falls. What period is situated between the archaic hunter-gatherers and the agricultural Mississippian cultures? Okay, that's the Woodland period. The Woodland period is nestled right in between all these prehistory time periods. I know I only said there's two time periods. That's the way I look at things. I did see a lot of people use the Archaic era and all these other things, but I have seen these labeled in different ways. First peoples, foreign influence, today's era, something like that. So really, how we organize our time periods, I think, is different than just really any. We have to talk about it. There's a nadir era of race relations that kind of goes in between the progressive era and the Gilded Age and the Reconstruction. So you got the nadir era that sort of cuts across, several different areas. The civil rights era, you could even say, had started during the Civil War, right? It was Lincoln. So you got all these connections, and that's one of the best things about history, is to be able to put those connections together, to see the patterns, to see the connections. So that's something. Question 19, the period is situated between the Archaic gatherers and agricultural Mississippian cultures. Already answered that. That was Woodland period. Within the Woodland period, which is easy to remember the dates of, 1000 BC to 1000 AD to 2000 period, 1000 before Christ, 1000 afterwards. And within the Woodland period, you got the Adena and the crab orchard culture. So there's some other cultures that was happening during this. A lot of the Shawnee tribes were independent, autonomous units. And even if they had, the Shawnees got like 13 or 12 different clans named after animals, and the coyote and the bear and all these other different clans. And then they got 5 different divisions, the Kispoko and the Chillicothe and the 3 other names I can't really pronounced. So it looks like they're actually pretty stratified and organized. The Iroquois, they had a confederacy. They had 5 or 6 nations, but they all gathered into one gigantic confederacy, right? So that's where the whole idea of a dualistic federal government came from, was the Iroquois. That's where we got the idea of having 13 colonies, but one united English colony. So it was in direct counter to the Iroquois. So my point being is just that perhaps we created the Iroquois, perhaps we created a nation where it didn't even exist, perhaps we created the Shawnee. They could have just been, you know, their coyote tribe, but then they had to sort of band together with everybody else. I actually even read that there's only about 2,000 Shawnee Native Americans, just 2,000 of them, and that's it. So that's remarkable. That's not that many at all. Which Native American tribe did Ben Franklin say was America's backyard experiment? And I just explained this with the whole Confederacy. The Iroquois Indians were the tribe that Ben Franklin says that was America's backyard experiment. Like I said, because the Confederacy had 5 or 6 nations banding together under one umbrella, the Iroquois. That actually goes to bite the Iroquois sort of in the butt, because once they say the Iroquois Confederacy is a unit, then they say the Iroquois Confederacy controls Kentucky, controls Ohio, controls New York, controls the Great Lakes. So when they subdued the Iroquois, the Treaty of Fort Stanwix, the British thought they owned Kentucky, right? The Iroquois signs away the hunting rights of Kentucky, so therefore the British thought that the Kentucky was theirs, since the Iroquois said it was theirs, since the Iroquois had won it through conquest. But that's not the case. You have Shawnee Indians, Cherokee Indians, Ute Indians, Chickasaw Indians, lots of Native Americans that actually didn't come, you know, out of that group. So those are the 5 questions, right? So that only took 7 minutes, right? Maybe I got another 7 minutes to talk about the mysterious mound builders of Wycliffe. Wycliffe in Ballard County at the confluence of the Ohio and Mississippi rivers. It's a hotbed of archaeological research because it was once home to a mound building community about which we know very little. What do we know about the mound building communities of Wycliffe and Ballard County? Here's a picture of it. So right at the western tip, right? So there could be a lot of different people. It could be the Chickasaw, it could be the Shawnee, it could be the Cherokee. Well, we know that we're talking about the Mississippian culture, okay? So what do we know about the mound builders? Well, they made beautiful pottery, especially of eerie-looking owls, symbolic of the underworld and the dead. They're generally regarded as having been part of the Mississippian culture, which is considered the probable ancestor of the later Native American tribes that populated the area by the time European settlers got here. It should be noted that the entire Mississippian geological period was 360 to 320 million years ago, which is different than the Mississippian culture. So we need to make sure they are talking about a time period, but the Mississippian culture is talking about a very smaller set of time period that's associated with the eastern woodland Indians, but not with the entire world, because there's a Mississippian geologic period, which is 360 million years ago, which I have no idea how that would be relevant. What was alive 360 million years ago? So probably, possibly, maybe archaeologists and ethnologists like to put things in boxes, assign them to categories as much as the next person, so they separate the Mississippian culture into 3 extremely broad, vague, and arbitrary categories. There's early Mississippian cultures, middle, and late. So early, they said, was making a transition to a more primitive way, to a more sophisticated life. The middle is the peak of the Mississippian people's development, because it was then that they instituted a form of government being led by a chief and a chieftain. So this is about 1200 AD to 1400 AD. This is when Cahokia was around. Late, this is when things really get interesting. Many tribes that we now retroactively classify as Mississippian were not necessarily connected or closely linked. Many lived out most of their existence isolated from one another. They didn't keep in touch with websites, email, didn't have a newsletter yet. Civilizations all began to go down the tubes at exactly the same time. A way of life that had sustained itself for centuries fell apart, and for no discernible reason, the tribe simply and completely vanished from Wycliffe. Why? We don't know. Is there any sign of war, disaster in the city's remains? No. Any sign of disease or epidemic? No. Something made a centuries-old civilization pack up everything and move out. They left their burial mounds behind, which stayed intact for centuries until 1930, when a man named Fane King looked upon the mighty works of whose enigmatic denizens of the past and knew what must be done. He dug up the sacred mounds and turned the place into a tourist trap. This sad state of affairs continued until 1983, well past the point when someone should have stood up and said, hey, wait a minute, what the heck are we doing? Thankfully, Murray State University finally reclaimed the site in the name of scientific research, and in 2004, the area became federally protected land as part of the State Park Service. Today, you can visit the Wycliffe Mound State Historic Site. It's a gift shop, museum. It consists of 3 excavated mounds, demonstrations of Mississippian burial practices, displays of artifacts from the site. These artifacts include peculiar figural pottery with haunting faces. The most famous of all Wycliffe artifacts, however, was a creepy effigy of a great horned owl, which was unfortunately stolen by burglars in 1988. Never seen again, however, like priceless works of famous art heisted from museums. Such items are nearly impossible to sell, even on the black market. The purloined owl totem probably currently occupies a display case or special perch in a secret room somewhere, viewed by who knows who for who knows what purpose. So, yeah, somebody's stealing all these artifacts in Wycliffe. Who are these mound builders? These are the very Native Americans who, they say, what happened to them? They all were just wiped out. Yeah, it's probably a war, probably the, you know, the 1400s. That was Hernando de Soto, right? He got here, what, 1340 or 1540? So I guess actually it's a little bit away. 1400, that's a long time ago. So, man, who knows why the Wycliffe burial mound actually was wiped out. Could be a whole number of reasons, and ones we don't know about. So that's unfortunate. But you want to find out something about the prehistoric Indians? Check out the archaeological dig at Wycliffe. Buried skulls, ancient civilization under Lexington, and the Brandenburg Stone. So it's page 22, right, to 23. And really, if you want to learn this stuff, just, you know, you can read it way more faster than you hear me explain it. But by me explaining it, it actually becomes embedded in me. So I think everybody should be making videos just like this, explain to, you know, their neighbor what they're reading. So buried skulls. In 1792, an early settler, General John Payne, made a horrifying discovery while building this house in the Bracken County town of Augusta, just 53 miles southwest of the Great Serpent Mound, not far from the Ohio-Kentucky border. Okay, so he found some buried skulls, very, you know, not just 53 miles, right, southwest of the Great Serpent Mound. From Historical Sketches of Kentucky by Lewis Collins, Maysville, 1847, page 205. The bottom on which Augusta is situated is a large burying ground of the ancients. They've been found in great numbers in all sizes everywhere between the mouths of Bracken and Locust Creeks, a distance of about 1.5 miles from the cellar under my Payne's dwelling. 60 by 70, over 110 skeletons were taken. I measured them by skulls, and there might have been more whose skulls had crumbled into dust. The skeletons were of all sizes, from 7 foot to infant. David Kilgore, who was a tall and very large man, passed our village. Still, tall skeleton, 7 foot. David Kilgore, who's a very tall and very large man, passed our village at the time I was excavating my cellar, and we took him down and applied a thigh bone to his. The man, if well proportioned, must have been 10 to 12 inches taller than Kilgore, and the lower jaw bone would slip on over his skin and all. Who were they? How came their bones here? When I was in the Army, I acquired of old Crane, a Wyandotte, and of Angler, son of Delaware, both intelligent old chiefs. They give me no information in reference to these remains of antiquity. Some of the largest trees of the forest were grown over the remains when the land was cleared in 1792. So after this, the skulls disappeared from history. Another strange chapter of Kentucky's ancient past comes to an inconclusive one. Whom did the skulls belong to? Why were some so large? Where did they go? How come people keep on getting rid of all these artifacts and they just lose them all? Over 110, supposedly over 110 skulls were found in Bracken County. And nobody says anything about them. 110 in Bracken County, over Augusta. Who are they? We have no evidence. Who gives a shit, right? Who cares? So we're going to get to ancient civilization under Lexington. The questions for next week. What is the main difference between the Paleo-Indians and the Archaic Paleo-Indians, right? So the very oldest ones and the second very oldest ones. What's the main difference between the Woodland periods and the Mississippian periods? Where did the idea of a dual federal state government, dualism, originate from? What tribe did it originate from? What are the Ahwahnee, Shannoah, and Eskippakithiki? What are they? What's Ahwahnee, Shannoah, Eskippakithiki? Who knows? I mean, these are just names of what? What unique thing is the entire city of Middlesboro sitting in? So those are questions for next week.